University Career Center. Thank you all for joining. We have a fantastic panel here to answer questions and give you all some insight about the strange time that we're in right now. If we don't mind, let's just all go around, introduce yourself, and say a little bit about what you do and where you work. So, Jackie, do you mind kicking us off?
Sure. So my name is Jackie Baker. I am the Senior Director of Member Relations at Nonprofit Connect in Kansas City. We are the professional association or kind of like a chamber of commerce just for nonprofit organizations. So we provide professional development, workforce training, as well as networking and resources, all just for nonprofit organizations.
Awesome. You next.
Good morning. Can you all still hear me? I changed to my microphone.
Absolutely. You're coming in great.
My name is Jacques Hassan. I am the Director of Human Resources for Starlight Theater here in Kansas City. I graduated from Missouri Western State College when it was a college versus a university with a degree in personnel psychology, and I have over 10 years of HR experience. Right now, a lot of things have changed in regards to COVID. We actually have pretty much lost our whole season this year because we are an entertainment venue. So we have kind of been focusing a little bit more on some things such as inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. So we're kind of trying to focus on some things that we may not have been able to actually touch on if we had such a busy season. So we're still continuing to be able to work and keep our employees employed at this time.
Awesome. Meredith?
Hi, my name is Meredith Wiggins. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I graduated from Birmingham Southern College in 2010 with a major in English and a minor in theater, so just peak employability right there. I am currently the Assistant Director for Career Services at University of Kansas School of Law. And full disclosure, I was with the University Career Center for about a year as the Assistant Director.
Oh, well, we lost Meredith, so we'll come back to her. Dulces, why don't you pick up where she left off?
My name is Dulces Hernandez. I am a Shocker Wichita State grad. I have been working for Hunter Hamilton in the recruiting space for about 5 years now. We specialize in finance and accounting recruiting, but we also specialize in other resume building, interview tips. We also are a networking group, and we also support the mortgage industry.
Awesome. Carolyn?
Hi, my name is Carolyn Messick, and I am the Human Resources Manager for the Kansas City Chiefs. I am entering my 7th season with the team, and I graduated from the University of Kansas, Rock Chalk, with a degree in journalism and a concentration in communication studies and a concentration in psychology. So kind of all over the board.
Well, great. Well, thank you very much. Meredith, we lost you for a second. Was there anything else that you wanted to add? You're currently the Assistant Director at the University of KU Law School Career Services. Meredith, we're having trouble hearing your audio, so I'm just going to go ahead and...
What about now?
Yep, there you go.
Okay. I help students with career exploration, networking, professionalism in legal and legal adjacent fields.
Perfect. All right. Well, I kind of want to start with just a broad question. As everyone knows, we are in the middle of a pandemic that, Jac, you mentioned how Starlight has lost their season. All sorts of businesses are facing unprecedented issues as far as their normal operations, hiring, and that sort of thing. And so I kind of want to ask broadly, Dulces, I'd be really interested to hear your insight, but all of yours, what are maybe some common misconceptions people may have about job searching during a pandemic, during a recession, that sort of thing?
I feel that there's a little bit of a misconception with some of the employers, actually.
Okay.
I know watch, what the unemployment rate is, and this sometimes doesn't really affect, I guess, the college students to a certain degree, but it does affect them and what they see the market having as far as quality talent. We are seeing from a recruiting standpoint that individuals who, new grads specifically, there is a little bit of a challenge, and I think that it's because it has somewhat been saturated with some individuals that have been laid off due to COVID. It's kind of slowing down the process for some of our new grads getting positions. And I
Sure.
think that's a little bit due to employers assuming that there are more talent out there. In reality, there's either they're there and they're not just coming out to be employed, or they're not there and they are employed. So that's a little bit of what we're seeing anyway.
Gotcha. Anyone else? Any thoughts on just common misconceptions that you're finding job seekers or just people in general may have about looking for a job in this sort of climate?
I'll chime in, and not necessarily for my industry, but I think one of the biggest misconceptions is there are no jobs.
Mm.
There's a lot going on due to COVID in regards to layoffs and furloughs, and there's a uptake in people applying for jobs, but you need to actually go out onto online sites such as Indeed, ZipRecruiter, and so forth, and actually see what jobs are available, because there are people that are looking to fill positions even in this current climate that we're in. I think that's probably the biggest misconception, that there are no jobs to be had at this time.
And I'll follow up with what Jacques was saying, that there's even new jobs being created, right? As everyone moves to this entirely virtual workplace, the dependence on expertise and familiarity with technology is huge. So that's something that definitely gives recent grads who have grown up using technology and may even have kind of a leg up on some other candidates in terms of, especially now having gone through virtual learning, that's definitely something to highlight as you're looking for jobs.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, during, this is both applicable to now and, during time of a pandemic and recession, but it can be really hard for students to know when and where to even start looking for jobs. Is there anything that you would recommend? Right now it's September, heading into October. We're still in the thick of all the uncertainty. Is there such a thing as starting too early to scope out sort of positions you might be looking for?
I definitely don't think it's ever too soon to start looking for positions. I think that it's something that's important for individuals who are kind of searching for jobs right now is getting familiar with job postings and how descriptions are being written. I think a lot of times students they see a job that they might be interested in, but it doesn't really apply to the experience that they've had. So I think it's really important to start looking at job descriptions, understand how they're written, kind of expectations for that entry level job. So I definitely don't think it's ever too early.
I would concur with that, Carolyn. I think especially when you start earlier, you give yourself time to figure out not only how positions are being written, but where they're being posted. If there's a particular recruiter contact who's often listed, that might be someone that you could try to get into your network and to get to know folks who are working in the field.
Absolutely.
I'd like to also add one of the things, if we have students that are interested in applying for, let's say, government positions, I would stress that they start as early as possible. And the reason I say that is because sometimes their process takes a very long time. So the earlier that they actually apply and submit their credentials through USA Jobs and so forth, the better.
Excellent.
I agree. In our space for finance and accounting, are some of the students going in that direction, highlighting any Excel usage that you have, any ERP systems that you've been exposed to, anything in your previous background in work history that you can transition or correlate to that job description is always a plus.
And one more thing to add in regards to actually applying, we want to make sure that the students are pretty much putting their best foot forward. That means making sure their resume looks great, and understand, like, if you are applying for government positions, the whole process and the resume and application are completely different than if you were to apply, let's say, on Indeed. And they need to be actually prepared to be able to submit their credentials in different ways on different sites and so forth before they actually start looking.
And I'll kind of speak to the nonprofit side too. And Jacques, I'm sure you can agree with this, that I know when I was going through my senior year, my friends were getting hired at Cerner in like December. And I wasn't graduating till May. Looking at nonprofit organizations, they typically don't hire until they really need someone to start pretty soon. So I just spent my time networking, really working on my resume and cover letter, and then wasn't actually applying for jobs until a little bit closer to my graduation date. And that's typical for smaller organizations. It might be typical for smaller businesses as well.
Well, Jackie, that's a perfect segue to our next question. So, networking is something that always gets talked about as something that can provide a leg up for you, regardless of what sort of company or industry you're trying to get into. And I'm really curious in all your guys' perspective, but, let's talk about nonprofits for a second. How, if I'm a student right now, we're about to be in October, and I know I want to work in a nonprofit. Is it okay to try and start networking when it's so far away, especially, if there's a concern that, maybe they're having to furlough or lay off staff?
I would say absolutely. I welcome and in fact have had already this semester students reach out to me and ask if we can have a virtual coffee and just have kind of an informational interview. And I always recommend if students are networking or meeting with someone, the last question that you should ask should be, who should I meet next? Who else can you connect me with? So that way you can kind of build that chain of different nonprofit professionals or whatever professionals in the industry that you're trying to meet with. But if you set it up as being informational and just wanting to learn more about the industry rather than saying I'm looking for a job right now, professionals are usually more than willing to share their experience and help you get ready.
I gotcha. That's awesome. And go ahead, please.
Yeah, just to add to that, I know in our case, we have already started the process of gearing up for our next internship season already. We kind of start off early. So I think in the next month or so, we're going to actually be having Zoom meetings, possibly kind of like internship fairs and so forth, because we like to try to get as many candidates as possible. And I don't think it's a bad thing to start early. And I do not see any harm in building network and relationships because especially while we're going through COVID-19, right now it's one of those things we may not have any jobs now, but it's always good to kind of set yourself up in the event that once we do have some positions open, whether it's internships or actual full-time employment, we already know who you are. We're already aware, and we can say, "Hey, I remember such and such, and I think they would be a great candidate." And maybe the look and the search may not be that long.
And so, Carolyn and Jacques, especially Jacques, I guess can you talk a little bit about what's an appropriate way to make that introduction or make that ask to do that sort of virtual coffee? Because, I've had students ask me that, I know it's important, especially for two very highly sought after organizations that you both work at. But, Doc, you mentioned it, and, everyone knows that the sports industry is really just fighting to, keep the status quo going. Is it how do they word it so it doesn't come across as, hey, I want to meet with you so that, I can get a job when, you see what I'm saying, that like when you guys are probably worried about, we want to keep our own jobs and, we're trying to help our own employees stay employed. How do students navigate that?
I think first and foremost, I think a really easy way to connect with people is LinkedIn. We can probably all agree that LinkedIn is a super convenient way to make those connections. I think we can also all agree that we're probably getting inundated with requests from soon-to-be college graduates wanting to kind of have that opportunity to connect. My rule of thumb is I have been in their shoes before. So if I have the time and I am able to accommodate either a virtual face-to-face pre-COVID or exchanging a couple emails back and forth, I'm absolutely willing to do that. We've all been there. We've all been in their shoes and you got to start somewhere. So even if it's not a guarantee, yes, you have this job, at least you're putting your best foot forward and you're making that effort to show that, hey, I am interested in this. And if the answer is no now, well, maybe it can be yes down the line. So those are just important things to think about. And I think something else that's important to note is just being grateful for cities and time who is in that position that they're seeking their attention and just saying, thank you so much. I know you're busy, but I really appreciate your time. That really goes a long way. And sometimes I think it kind of gets lost in part of the process. So.
I agree. I really don't have much to add to that. The one thing I will say is, ironically, this is a very good time to try to reach out and network because, depending on how our business is going, we may have more time to actually focus on, having more virtual meetings and actually kind of investing more time into actually speaking with people versus than we would when we had our busy season going on.
Before we move on from that, I would add that when you're making those acts of reaching out and asking for someone's time, if the industry is somewhat in flux, if you're dealing with an organization or a whole field that is experiencing changes, which a lot of fields are, that can be a thing that you ask about. You can say, like, where do you see industry going from here? And then that makes it a much more conversation in a lot of ways, because it shows that you as a potential future colleague are thinking about how you're going to be a colleague down the road.
And I just want to follow up and add to Carolyn's point on being gracious and thankful. We just went through a hiring process at my organization. I think I had like 2 candidates send me thank you emails. So especially right now, since a lot of people aren't in their office or, kind of working from home, the thank you email goes so far. Please be gracious all through the hiring process if you're able.
And just to kind of piggyback off that, it's funny because I haven't been in my office in so long, and so I'm just starting to come back. These are, in regards to thank you notes, these are envelopes full of thank you notes from individuals that I've connected with via phone, email, virtual, face-to-face. So a thank you note really, truly does go quite a long way.
I agree.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Sorry, go ahead, Elsie.
I'm sorry. Just to add that, it sometimes seals the deal when you're looking to get hired. It leaves that last impression with that hiring manager or HR.
Absolutely.
I will share. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go for it.
I will share a story about somebody who I did hire based on a handwritten thank you note. Our HR intern position, which he now is the general manager's assistant, so he's obviously doing pretty well. But I had great interviews. I had 8 interviews when I was interviewing him, and all of these really qualified individuals, and something about him just stuck out. He wrote a thank you note. He wrote 2 handwritten thank you notes, and he followed up. He did everything he was supposed to do, and unfortunately, the others didn't. I didn't hear thank you notes from the other 7, and it was kind of an easy decision at that point. So I agree. Absolutely can seal the deal.
Well, and that's such a great anecdote, by the way. I mean, all things being equal, that can make yourself stand out. And the fact that you have that stack of envelopes at your desk, students, that should really, say a lot about how it's an easy thing. And like you said, Jack, so many of us are working from home or not working at the office that, it doesn't necessarily have to be handwritten at this moment. That that letter could get lost for a little while, but a thank you email goes a long way. Meredith, do you mind muting your line just for a second when you're not talking? That would be awesome.
Trying, and it's not letting me.
Okay, no worries at all.
This is all the things that can go wrong on a Zoom interview.
Nope.
All of them here with me.
No problem. We do have one question from the chat. And once again, students, if you're watching here live, you can definitely feel free to comment on questions. We've talked a lot about networking. I think this would be a really good place to kind of sum it all up. I think, we probably all personally have struggled with this, and especially for graduating students. Amy is asking, if someone struggles with networking, do you have any more tips or suggestions to become more comfortable with it? I know that I can speak from my experience. It can feel awkward at times of like, I know that Jackie is super busy and that, she probably gets 10 of these a month, or, how do you recommend students just try and get a little bit more comfortable and confident when they're making these asks?
I think something you can definitely do is lean on your network. If you see an organization or a person that you want to get in contact with, who do you know that can help you make that connection so it maybe is not as awkward or like a cold call? And rely on your university. I mean, make sure that you are looking at your professors, your advisors, because they were in the working world once, and so they have connections too. They are going to be able to maybe make that introduction or at least give you contact information. Also, talk to your parents, your friends' parents. Go on LinkedIn and see who's connected with who, because having that name that that person may recognize might make it that much easier to kind of get that foot in the door, even just for a coffee.
I would agree with all of that, and I would add that one way to make it feel a little less nerve-wracking once you've sort of established contact with the person is really do your research. Don't ask them something that is easily Googleable, right? You're not really there to get facts. You're there to get that person's perception on those facts and on the industry. And if you've done that research and you go in, you're going to be better prepared than a lot of people who ask for informational interviews. And following up on what Jackie said about using your university's resources, I know that my current office has databases of contacts that we can help put you in contact with. And then there's also the KU mentoring platform, mentoring.ku.edu, KU alumni who have signed up. I would love to be contacted to help people with networking questions. And you can search through that for people who do things that are similar to what you hope to do. I think it even provides templates to sort of help you decide how you want to phrase the ask when you reach out. So research the person you're going to be talking to, the field that you want to go into, and then see what resources you have you can take advantage of.
I agree.
Awesome. Well, that's really helpful insight. Another thing that I kind of wanted to ask about, and we've touched on it a little bit, is how, possibly the job market might be a little bit more flooded with, workers who have been furloughed or laid off who might have a little bit more experience than, a graduating senior. And, a common question that we get asked here at the office is, what should students do when they need experience for a certain job, but it's also hard to get that kind of experience when those jobs that provide it aren't necessarily available. How do y'all, and obviously it's case by case depending on the job, but are there some general suggestions or tips that you found have made a difference when you're looking to hire individuals?
I think that kind of going back to what we said about networking, it's never too soon to start networking. It's also never too soon to start looking for those on-campus opportunities, even as early as a freshman. I have another story, a girl that is now our HR coordinator. She was our intern. She worked at the KU bookstore, Rock Chalk, all 4 years of college. And even though she didn't necessarily have an internship experience, she had that experience in the bookstore. She had a manager position. And obviously that, to me, that shows consistency. She's obviously somebody that they can depend on. She's trustworthy, all important things in our HR field. So those were definitely things that stuck out to me. But never too soon to start looking for those on-campus opportunities, even if it's not something that you necessarily think you're going to do forever. Like, do you think you're always going to work inside the union? No, probably not. But you have that opportunity to kind of get that experience under your belt for 4 years while you're in college. So definitely getting that invaluable experience is important.
And I'll follow up and say that when you are looking at those on-campus experiences or internships, putting them on your resume and talking about them in your cover letter, draw that direct line between the skill that you used or got at your on-campus job or internship to the job description and exactly what they're looking for. Hiring managers are scanning, sometimes have machines doing it for them, scanning resumes super quick. And so rather than making us look through and kind of figure out how your experience might connect to this job, use the keywords that are in the job description, explain how your working at the bookstore and your customer service experience is really going to be the same skills that you're looking for in this job description that is member facing or client facing. Make that direct line easy for the hiring manager to see.
And I would also like to add that one of the things our graduating students need to realize is there's an opportunity or a chance that they may not get a position directly out of school that is basically in their field and so forth. So a lot of times what you need to do is actually get your foot in the door, and it may not necessarily be the exact, position that you were hoping that you would get, but sometimes just getting into the door and into a good company, let's say the Chiefs or so forth, and actually working your way up is the way to go. Especially in this economy right now, you may not be able to find an accounting position right off, or a position in HR or so forth. And I can tell you, HR is a very competitive uh, uh, department or whatnot. And a lot of people, once they get into HR, they don't leave. So it's one of those things where you kind of have to sometimes wait your turn to actually get in. But it's just really good sometimes to get your foot in the door and actually build that experience and that reputation so that you can actually progress within the company.
I'd like to speak to ensuring that you're putting the correct keywords in your resume is huge. There's so many times that I've spoken with talent and candidates that why am I not getting picked, or my resume's been out there for forever and I'm not just getting response. Tell them, have you looked at some of the positions you're applying for and how that correlates with your resume? A lot of times, like you said, hiring managers are looking at resumes quickly and they're letting the machine do that qualification and screening for them, and you get kicked out a lot of times. And highlighting, like Jackie said, those specific things in your previous experience that can correlate with some of those job descriptions. Then speaking to also, as a recruiter, we have all different types of opportunities. You're looking at temporary type opportunities, consulting, temp to hire. Don't be afraid to jump into some of those opportunities, because I've had in the finance and accounting space kids that graduate and then they find out that that's not what they want to do. And sometimes trying out those contractual type opportunities to get your foot in the door to really decide, is this for me? Is the culture for me? Is the environment for me? To go start and get yourself to see if that's exactly what you want to do.
Dulcie's, it's like you have access to my question sheet. That was the next question I was going to ask. And I'd love to hear what everyone else has to say. That, obviously it's such a catch-22 that, like you said, students have probably know that, you need to wait your turn. It's good to get in the door. But, what if the door isn't open at all? Is it worthwhile to look at contract or temporary positions at maybe a similar organization or doing similar sort of work? To use a Chiefs example, if I'm wanting to work for the Chiefs, is it worthwhile to look for a contract or temporary organization with something that's completely out of right field? And that applies to all your organizations. Is that something that stands out in a positive way? Because I think there can be a negative connotation assigned to, but if it says I only worked there for 4 months, are they gonna pass me over because I got let go or fired or anything like that? Can you kind of address that for students?
I kind of wanted to piggyback off something that was already said previously about the resumes. It's so important for individuals who are applying for jobs to really read those job descriptions and really understand those keywords. I think that we can all agree that there are keywords that are probably listed in every job description we've ever seen, we've ever posted. And to me, if I have somebody applying for a job, specifically for an HR position within my department, I absolutely want to see that they did take the time to read my job description, because that shows me that they have attention to detail, and that they are paying attention and that they are kind of serious about it. But to transition to the contract temporary work, I think I always say that any experience is good experience and no experience is bad. So definitely important to kind of figure out what you're interested in. And I think contract work, temporary jobs is a great way to do that. It's not a forever thing, and you are able to kind of get out of those a little bit easier. And I think they're great.
I would like to add to that and kind of get a little specific with my response because I think there's a big misconception in regards to positions at Starlight because when people think Starlight, they think entertainment, they think singing, dance, and Broadway concerts and so forth, but they don't realize that there's a back end of Starlight. There's the business aspect, there's accounting, there's marketing, there's philanthropy, and so forth. And so, someone who may have accounts payable background or may be able to get an accounts payable, accounts receivable position temporarily at another company, that actual experience will translate into if we have a possible accounting position open. So they need to realize that the skills that they're getting at different places, whether it's temporary, contract, or so forth, can actually translate into the next job that they're looking for. Also, with that, you never know if that temporary position is going to turn into a permanent position. So you should never, ever knock the opportunity if you can actually, again, get your foot in the door with a company and you work your tail off and you show them that you're about business and you know what you're doing and you're faithful and dependable and so forth, you could possibly get that permanent job that you weren't even expecting to get. So I would not discount temporary and contract positions whatsoever.
Off of what Jacques said, I think if you are concerned that they'll see you worked 4 months with an organization and then stopped, on the resume, as Carolyn was saying, you can designate contract position, temporary position to make it clear I fulfilled the terms of what I was there to do. And then off of what Jacques was saying, think in terms of the kinds of things that you know how to do, those transferable skills. Like you were saying, if you know how to work in a certain kind of environment, if you know how to do the kinds of things that are going to show up in lots of different places, then it's just a matter of keeping at it until you can get into the kind of organization you hope to be doing that thing at. For example, I taught for a long time, so I have a fair amount of experience doing public speaking, and I've worked in a number of roles where that was a big part of the job. So even though I wasn't trained in how to do public speaking for those particular roles, I knew how to do it because I'd been doing it as a teacher. And I was able to make that connection to the employer when they asked me what my experience was in that area.
Awesome. Well, once again, for those of you who are watching live, this is our Beyond KU panel on job searching and recession. If you have questions, feel free to comment, and we will try and get to them if we have time. Thank you to all our panelists. This has been great so far. One of the biggest traps applicants, and not just students, this is universal, can fall into is applying to too many jobs at the same organization. And I imagine that, this can even be more of a trap now that, for so many different companies, they probably haven't been hiring for a minute. And like, okay, now we've gotten the funding approved. We can open up these three positions. Dulces, I'd love to hear your insight first, but then all of you, can you share a bit about why students might need to be mindful? There is definitely, I wholeheartedly agree with what y'all have said. You need to get in the door in some cases, but at the same time, it's not necessarily a good idea to take, a shotgun sort of approach when it comes to applying for jobs.
Yes, sometimes when you're oversaturating yourself, it doesn't give employers an opportunity to really look at where your experience fits. There are times where I've had talent apply to 5 positions in one company, and then I get back, from HR, well, this candidate's applied to all of our positions, and it just looks as if you're either trying too hard or if you're not really looking at what you're applying to, and you're just trying to get into a company, I think is what happens with that.
That was going to be my exact sentiments. So you don't want to come across as desperate in regards to your job search. You actually want an employer to think, I really want to work for your company, and I feel that this position is something that I could do successfully and actually be productive for your company. If you have a company that has a couple of accounting positions open, let's say accounts receivable, accounts payable, payroll, so forth, and you qualify for all of those, that may not be a bad idea. But if you are applying for, let's say, accounts and then operations and then HR, it's not a good look.
It can risk
100%
suggesting that
correct.
you don't really know what your strengths are as a candidate. Um, and I think you want to come across as someone who has the judgment to know where you would be best. So if there are wildly divergent roles that you actually do think you would be good in either one, I think it's worth acknowledging to the hiring folks for each position that, hey, I am applying for this other role, but I think I would be great for yours because of reasons X, Y, Z.
I definitely agree with all of that. And I think it's important to remember that even though they're speaking for my industry, there's a lot of positions that we post usually at one time, specifically our seasonal positions for our Arrowhead Academy program that we do, which is essentially our intern program, but we've kind of made it a little fancy. Apply what you really want to do. Apply for those jobs that actually make sense for the experience that you've had or the goals that you have in your future. Take more time on that one application and for your resume and your cover letter versus just submitting the same resume and the same cover letter for every single job. Because as recruiters and as HR professionals, like, we see those things, and I can see the time that you've applied. I can see how, it took you 1 minute from one job to the next job. So it's important to kind of keep that stuff in mind, but also, don't waste your time applying for a job that you don't really want just because you want to work for that organization. Wait for something that actually makes sense. And if nothing else, your resume and your cover letter is somebody's first look at you. We don't have a chance to interact with you sometimes over the phone. So it's really important to make sure that you're professional, you're polished, and that prove that you've read that job description and you have a good understanding what this company and organization is looking for that position.
Can I
I'd like
add
to
a
add
couple
about
of?
the resume.
Yeah, go right ahead.
I'm sorry. You might have a couple of resumes that you might construct to fit different job descriptions depending on your work experience, and that's okay too. Like she said, if you're sending one resume to 5 jobs and your work experience not transitioning to those job descriptions, not a good idea. But if your experience, wherever you've gained your experience might fit multiple positions, but it doesn't fit in one resume, you might have 2 separate resumes that fit those job descriptions. So I guess it's okay to have multiple resumes, but don't make them the same resumes, more or less.
If I can just chime in, since we're talking about resumes, the HR professional in me wants to give students listening some specific advice in regards to the resume. 2 don'ts at this point. Please do not include your picture on your resume, because I have seen this. And at this time, you no longer need to put your address on your resume. And I'm stressing these because these are actual opportunities for discrimination. And we want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward, and whoever is reviewing your resume is actually looking at your credentials and nothing other than that. And I just want to stress that, because with me being an HR professional, I have actually seen this, and I can't stress to you enough how important it is to um, eliminate those from your resume. You do not want to give certain information and give people the opportunity to discriminate against you before you've even got an opportunity to be seen.
That is correct.
That's awesome advice. Thank you so much. Another option that students may be considering right now is graduate school. And I think a lot of them are wondering, is this a good option for students who, you can only talk about your industry specifically. But Meredith, I'd love to hear, just since you are a career services professional, how you would recommend students weigh what should they kind of be exploring of, this would be good, this would be valuable for me as a future professional, or no, it's just because the job market looks bad, that doesn't mean you need to invest, time and money into this while you wait for the job market to improve.
Absolutely. I think the number one thing that I would ask a student who came to me with that question is, first of all, why do you want to go to grad school? Do you want to go to grad school because you have a genuine interest in the field, because you think that doing that research or pursuing that additional credential would be personally enriching to you? Do you want to do it because most people that you have come across in the field that you want to go into seem to have that additional credential? In those cases, I think it can make a lot of sense to say right now, I'm going to choose to go ahead and earn this additional credential at a time when there aren't a lot of opportunities for entry-level work in the field I want to go into. However, if a student were to say, well, I just don't really know what else I would do right now, or it doesn't seem like a lot of people who do the work that I want to do seem to need this credential, or if it would require taking on a significant debt load, those would all be signs to me that it's worth at least doing more research before you make that decision. And full disclosure, I did ride out a significant portion of the sort of like 2008 to 2011-12 recession in grad school. At the time, I thought I wanted to do teaching in higher education, so I knew I would need to pursue a master's and potentially a PhD for that to happen. And I also was able to get a funded master's opportunity. So I wasn't taking on additional debt, and the career goals that I had at the time were going to require that degree down the road. My initial plan had been to work for a while and then go back, and I made that choice to go ahead right at that time because there weren't very many opportunities. And I don't regret the choice that I made, but I think it's really worth thinking critically about, will this opportunity really enrich my opportunities down the road? Is this something I would be doing anyway at some point, or is this something I'm doing purely to give me something to do now?
I would like to chime in and stress that I think it's going to depend on the industry. And the reason I say that is because, and I'll take HR for example, there are some companies that will put more weight into you having an HR certification than they might have you having a master's degree or a PhD and so forth. Some IT fields may be the same way. So I would really research the actual industry you're looking to go in and kind of decide what the path is that you would need to take next.
Agreed.
Well, and just since we're talking about industry, I know we have a lot of students who are watching or will be watching because, they heard that, oh, someone from nonprofit or sports or entertainment industry is here. Can y'all just speak a little bit to, obviously every position is different, but, when you're looking for kind of those generally entry level positions, is a master's degree or advanced degree something that is a plus that helps a candidate stand out, or is that something that doesn't necessarily weigh into the decision making? Jackie, how do nonprofits look at that?
So it kind of depends, right? Because a lot of times people ask about the nonprofit industry, and it's kind of the same thing as saying business. It's very broad. All different kinds of nonprofits. The nonprofit organization I work at is going to have a very different structure than Starlight, which is a huge arts organization. So I will caveat and say that it's not a one size fits all. I will say that generally in most roles, an advanced degree is not required. And in fact, a lot of times nonprofits are not able to guarantee that pay bump that you might get with an advanced degree versus other industries. However, as Jacques mentioned, there are certainly certain roles where you do need a degree or even a certificate. Social work obviously is one of them. Or even if you want to go into like museum curation, that's going to require like an MFA. So it just depends. But if you are looking for kind of just a general role in nonprofit, maybe marketing, fundraising, leadership roles, I would say it is just a mix of all of the nonprofit executives and leaders that I know of who has an advanced degree versus who just has a lot of nonprofit experience.
Carolyn, what about you?
Kind of the same thing. It's really hard to say. It is interesting though, since I started this position, I have noticed that the more resumes that I'm reviewing, there are those master's degrees on a lot more resumes. I don't necessarily think it weighs into a decision that we make. Obviously with sports, like we really like people to have any sort of experience. Sometimes students don't have that opportunity, and sometimes they have to work through school. All things that we take into consideration. So kind of what Jackie said, it kind of depends. It's not a one size fits all, but we definitely do see more and more master's degrees coming through on those resumes.
Awesome. Well, we're getting close to the end of the hour. So once again, students, if you're watching live and you have a question, feel free to comment and we'll try and get to it. Just one or two more questions. Thank you again, panelists, for your time. First, the question that everyone wants to know, they want you to look into the crystal ball and say, what's the future of employment look like in your specific industry? That's the question that everyone wants to know. And, obviously, none of us are reading the tea leaves perfectly, but I think it would be really interesting for students if you could just kind of like pull the curtain back just a little bit on this is how we see our industry changing because of COVID, and as far as what sort of opportunities may not be available in the long term, or hey, we just need to get through this for the next 6, 12, 18 months, whatever it looks like, and then it might start looking back to normal. So, and this is to anybody, but I think students would be really interested to hear of what the future of employment and hiring looks like for your industry.
I can start. I kind of highlighted our Arrowhead Academy program. We have 2 sessions a year where we have a class of, depending on what time of year it is, it's kind of crazy with football. Depending on the time of year that it is, will depend on how many interns we need to have. Some departments aren't busy during the season, which kind of sounds crazy. Some departments are super busy during the season. So that will depend on the class size that we have. But we hired actually our entire Arrowhead Academy class right before COVID hit. Literally the first day of COVID, March 13th, we had finalized our class, sent out our offer letters, super excited, new program. We were really excited to roll it out. And then unfortunately we had to pull back all the offers. We waited until, May to see if we could hopefully have some sort of resolution. But with our staff not in the building, it was really hard to make those offers in those cases justifiable as to why we needed them. But we're hoping to bring that back, and I think conversations are going to start soon. I think somebody mentioned that they also do internship. They're going to have Zoom internship meetings soon. So we're hoping to kind of start looking back at that program. But, taking it day by day, I think, is what most of us are probably doing, and just trying to keep our head above water.
And the
I'll go with the financing.
Oh, please go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
She's going to let you go, Dulce. Go for it.
Space, no worries. In the finance accounting space, we're starting to see a big growth, especially with the automation side, with most companies kind of going electronic. So for new grads coming out, even if it's not an internship, if it's something that you can get into, because companies with budget constraints, with lost revenue due to COVID, some companies are not able to hire permanently direct. So take advantage of the recruiters that are out there and in your specific career path, and utilize them to help you kind of navigate, what your industry might be and what you get into, and use them to help you get into some of these. Because I can tell you with a lot of companies, their budgets are not good, and so they're very hesitant as to how they can add to their team.
I'll go next. First and foremost, what I will say is our industry, since it's an entertainment industry, there's a lot of uncertainty on where we are and how we will move forward in regards to the effect that COVID-19 has had. There's a lot of fear in regards to the virus spreading and so forth. One of the good things that we have on our side is the fact that we are an outdoor venue, which helps in regards to a little bit of comfort level in regards to COVID-19 and the spread. We still do social distancing, wearing masks and so forth. But there's a lot of give and take on that. And it's a lot of uncertainty. We're just not really sure how this thing is going to actually progress. We are hoping that we're able to have a full season next year for both Broadway and concerts. But it's kind of one of those things that we just kind of have to play by ear. What I will say is we were fortunate enough to, one, keep all of our employees, and two, we were actually fortunate enough to have interns work for us this summer, which we were not sure we would be able to do since we didn't have a season. And, with COVID and shutting down all of our shows, budgeting and financing was a little different. But thank goodness for funds outside of our natural budgeting. We were able to still have our interns come in. So we had about 7 or 8 interns work for us this summer. We still actually have one working with us in our marketing department because we have a couple of projects. So it just kind of depends, I think, on how COVID plays out in regards to how our actual industry is going to move forward.
Awesome. Well, we'll wrap up here with just one final question of what piece of encouragement, we've talked a lot about the uncertainty, but, we'll try and end on a more positive note. What piece of encouragement would you want to share with students as they prepare or maybe are already searching for jobs? We know there's a lot of uncertainty, but are there any glimmers of hope or things that you want to say just to encourage them to, keep looking and keep doing the work they need to be doing?
I would say first and foremost, stay positive. This might be one of the first times in your life that you are going to go through rejection or get told no, especially if you're someone who has achieved high in college and, done everything you possibly could do, right, to get that perfect job. It's going to be tough, but use all of your tools, use your network, and when it's the right fit, it will work out.
Mhm.
Well said.
Yep. Keep fighting.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for participating in our panel today. This will be available online at the KU Career Center page, both on Facebook, YouTube, and the career.ku.edu page. If you have more questions, definitely feel free to reach out to us at ucc@ku.edu. And thank you, panelists, for your time. Tracy, if you'll go ahead and take us off live, that would be lovely.